just maybe 3 years ago, looking at the Black Study shelf. And I'm looking at these bulletproof, scholarly, incredible books. I mean, 1619 and Cast and just all these books. Necessary, indispensable books. But then I said, these books are diagnostic mostly. There's not a lot of stuff in here about remedy, about what you do when you come back from the No King's March, what you do after you've written the check to the political candidate. And there's certainly not any space here for the story of one guy.
Welcome to Journey of the Art, where we discuss the artist, unravel the art, and explore the road between. Hello, and welcome back to Journey of the Art. Today, I'm joined by a very distinguished guest, Dr. Craig Yorke, a retired neurosurgeon and author of Steep, which is a Black neurosurgeon's journey, a really interesting memoir, I would call it. Dr. Craig Yorke was born in Roxbury, Massachusetts. He received a BA from Harvard College in 1970 and an MD from Harvard Medical School in 1974. After a neurosurgical residency at the University of California, he and his wife Mary found their home on their way to Kansas. He practiced in Topeka for 25 years while they raised their two sons. And I'm really glad to have you on the show today because one of the things that I love about your book is it isn't just a retelling of things that happen in your life, but if you read closely, you'll see that the focus is really on the psychology and the things that were happening in your mind as these events happened. And I don't know that we get a glimpse into that all of the time. And from time to time, you leave us little bits and pieces here and there, and then we have to piece everything together to try and see what you were thinking and feeling in those moments. So I would say that your book was an experience for me. So thank you for writing it.
Hey, thanks for taking a look.
You're welcome. Well, before we begin the conversation, here's a reminder to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you're watching, or follow the show if you're listening to us today. It really makes a difference. All right, Craig, I left something out in your bio, and that's the fact that you're a credible violinist, as you say. And throughout the book, what we see in your life is an interesting blend of the arts and the sciences. And so I thought I'd ask you, do you think that you would have been happy as an artist?
I don't know. I think that all of us have artistic bents. And I think that for many years, I didn't have a lot of ways to express that inclination. But now, at age 76, 77, here I am writing a book. Yeah. So, yeah, the arts kind of sneak up on you. They certainly snuck up on me with respect to the cover of the book. I can tell you that.
That again. I usually like to show the books. So here is the cover, and this is what you're talking about. It's this drawing, and I forget the name of the artist who drew, but he had an insight into the way that the brain actually works.
Yes.
And so, very interesting. When you read the book, for those of you who are listening or watching, you get some more insight into that, and maybe you can share on that as we go along.
Don't get me started.
But this book really began as a letter to your boys.
That is true.
How have they felt about it?
Interesting. Well, to start at the end, when I finished it, I showed it to Mary, my wife, and to our boys. They had final edit. And both of our boys excised almost all I had written about them. They said, "This is your book, not ours. There's no room for boasting. You can boast to the podcasters if you want, but you're not going to boast on the pages." So that was how that worked. I was getting on in years, and it was time to say something to them in a letter that didn't make it into family reunions or Thanksgiving dinners.
Mm-hmm.
Difficult history, stuff that was hard to share.
Mm-hmm.
So I can go into the origin story of the book. I mean, I was writing and I thought I had done a good job. And then Mary and I, several years ago, found ourselves in a long line waiting to get into the Black Smithsonian Museum in DC. And as we got closer, I saw these words chiseled into the concrete over the entrance. And they're just a couple lines from James Baldwin. And the lines go, the great force of history is that it lives within us, controls us unconsciously, emphasis on unconsciously. And as I shuffled forward, I thought, the only guy in this whole line that Baldwin is talking to is me. And I need to rededicate myself and get a little more conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And so I dug deeper and exploded the chronology and thought harder about the parts of my past that were hard. And I started to get a little lighter. The armor that I had been assigned as a kid started to lighten up a little bit. And then I got encouraged by a poet from St. Louis, Missouri, of all places. T.S. Elliot is his name. Not many folks know he comes from St. Louis, but he wrote about memory. And what he wrote was, this is the use of memory for liberation, not less of love, but the expanding of love beyond desire. And so liberation from the future as well as the past. So I've got the wind at my back at this point. I'm writing and I've got a manuscript. And then I'm standing at a big bookstore just maybe 3 years ago, looking at the Black Study shelf. And I'm looking at these bulletproof, scholarly, incredible books. I mean, 1619 and Cast and just all these books, necessary, indispensable books. But then I said, these books are diagnostic mostly. There's not a lot of stuff in here about remedy, about what you do when you come back from the No King's March, what you do after you've written the check to the political candidate. And there's certainly not any space here for the story of one guy, from the lower middle class in, the second half of the 20th century. So I thought, well, maybe I can expand this Black Studies shelf an inch and maybe redefine the category or maybe at least grow the audience a little bit. So that's the origin story of the book.
Yeah. And I do see that in the book, which is what I was referring to earlier about, the glimpses of what was going on through your mind. So when you were talking about memory, just now, I said, yeah, that checks out. And I think the other thing that struck me about the book is as a parent, just watching what your upbringing did to you, and how those experiences carried on into your adult life and also in the way that you parented your boys. So kudos to you. I want to say thank you. I like to say thank you a lot. So thank you for taking that challenge and rising to it.
You're very kind. Honestly, my wife, Mary, did a lot of the parenting. Neurosurgery was hungry for my attention in those years. And, affluence had its own challenges. I mean, the desperation that I grew up with was different. It flowed from the Depression, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But their challenge was different. And I will say that they are amazing fathers. They are amazing citizens. And, really, they're the best evidence that I've got that I have done a creditable job on the planet.
Yep. So one of the things I wondered about is in the book, you you write about how you were taught to conduct yourself as a Black boy in a very racist environment,
Mhm.
and how this caused you to be repressed in a way, and gather this sort of propriety that prevented you from enjoying life and making friends.
Yeah.
And you talk about the impact of that on your ability now to express yourself even now. And I could see glimpses of it in the writing. Like you'd go so far and then you'd come back. You'd go
Mhm.
so far and then you'd come back. Do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Well, I was raised in a bunker. My parents were significantly wounded by their
Mm,
experience, and they chose to treat those wounds by forging me into a weapon against their experience. And what that meant was that I was leading someone else's life. It meant that I was going to be a credit to the race. It meant that there was a lot of surrogacy um, in our family, a lot of fusion is a term the psychologists like to use. Um, so all that's true. Even today, I see myself as kind of a restrained person. I think part of it is by choice now.
mm,
Um, Part of the uh, restraint comes from the work that I chose. If you are in conversation with a neurosurgeon and you're a patient, the words that the neurosurgeon uses, the body language that they use, are very weighty. They carry tremendous impact. So you learn, or I did at least, to be very careful what you say and how you say it and what you don't say.
mm.
So I guess part of my restraint is my upbringing, but part of it is professional.
Right, right. Um, the other thing that I noticed is contradictions. And so you grew up being acquainted with certain contradictions. You attended an elite school. You were invited to the White House to play your instrument, and you were invited to other places of importance. In fact, in one of those places, your dad was told you, well, you can't be here, but you could be here because you were a tool of entertainment.
Yeah.
But within the four walls of your home was another contradiction of extreme frugality, which you talk about a lot in the book.
Mhm.
And again, you talk about that struggle between, exposure to the fine things of life and, this
Mhm.
different world. But then there's also this world where you're scraping every little cent to attain this world. So do you still see evidences of that in your life now, where it's like, I have all this money because I'm a neurosurgeon, but also I was raised to save up and keep things within certain boundaries.
Yeah, sure. That I think that persists for many of us.
Mm,
There's a little bit in the book about trying to become convinced that we had enough money, that I wouldn't have to work 90 hours a week anymore. And even today, I very rarely stray far from the clearance aisle at the department stores and so forth. So, yeah, I think that I have inside me a sense of scarcity. On the other hand, there is contradiction there. Our older son convinced us to take a great trip to Scandinavia last summer, and I chose not to think too much about what the economics of that were.
yeah. Oh, thank God for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of your sons, you one of the other things you talk about in the book is the way that they were able to make their own choices,
Yeah.
whereas you were led to live a life that was mapped out for you. How does that make you feel now?
It's a source of immense gratitude, to see that they've been able to put their talents to use and that the world has recognized them. It's just, it gives me great, great comfort.
Yeah. I want to take us back to the weight of being a Black person
Mhm.
in professional spaces, because I think if there's anything that I grasp from this book, it's this weight of being a Black person in a space where you're not expected to be there.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
as someone who is also Black in spaces where I'm most of the time the only Black person, I do understand that weight, the way to show up a certain way, the
Mhm.
the weight to, you can't be too vulnerable. You really always have to restrain yourself.
Yeah, it's
You
true.
really always have to, there's a constant fear in your mind that you'll be misunderstood, that you need to stay on the straight and narrow because
Mhm.
there are so many assumptions about you, and
Yeah.
you're constantly wanting to make sure that you're not part of the statistics,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
But I do want to take us back to that weight in relation to a $40 million malpractice lawsuit that
Mm.
was leveled against you, which you won, by the way. And you, after that, you talk about how this experience kind of chipped away at that self assurance that you had built from childhood, and how you then had to scrutinize everything that you did. So every
Mm.
case note was like, I have to make sure that everything is correct because I could
Mhm.
be sued tomorrow. I want to make sure that's.
Mhm.
Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that weight, the weight of um, propriety and um yeah, I guess propriety is the word, as a Black person in spaces where there aren't many Black people?
Well, it began at about age 11, you know, entering this intensely competitive public school. And what ensued over the next 2 or 3 decades was putting on one layer of armor after another,
Hmm.
layers of armor of credentials, of skills, of erudition, uh, all of which, worked somewhat, but the armor was never entirely impregnable, I'd say. Um, with respect to the malpractice suit, I was trained in such a way and missed, the training was ineffective in this sense. I was told, as everybody training at that time was, that good doctors don't make mistakes,
Hmm.
that, good doctors are right every time. And so there's that burden. And then the malpractice suit basically changed how I subconsciously responded to each new patient. Each new patient was now a potential litigant. And probably the patients and the nurses didn't see that,
Hmm.
but I knew it, that everything I wrote could end up as an exhibit in the courtroom. Everything I said could be, tape recorded or interpreted or misinterpreted. So I'm hardly unique in that. I mean, that is not a Black doctor thing. Every doctor, goes through something like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it is a process of armoring yourself. And the great benefit I had in midlife was making a choice to begin a process of disarmament, a process of steeping, if you
Hmm.
will. Steep is an adjective, and there's a lot in the book about the adjective of the steep climb. But steep is also a verb, and it's what happens to tea or broth. And it's that meaning that's more important to me as I was writing. Um, anyway, I hope that helps to answer a little bit.
Yeah, yes, it does. It does. And it actually leads me to my next question, because after 25 years of practice, and 30 years in operating rooms, I guess,
Mhm.
you came to a reluctant decision that it was time. You had peaked and it was time to take a step back and retire. And your dad was not happy about it. And he said, what would I brag about? But I was so happy and proud of you, if I can say that, that you were able to make that decision. Because um, if you were raised in a certain way where everything has to be done a certain way, it's hard to relinquish that control.
Mhm.
But I wanted to ask you, are you proud of yourself for making that decision?
Oh, I don't know. I think that pride and shame are two sides of the same coin.
Mm,
Uh, it was a good decision. It was a very good decision. I've been blessed. You know, for much of my life, I did as I was told, and all of us have inertia in our lives. But when we've come to forks in the road, we've decided well, and the decision to leave the OR was a good decision. I did medicine after that for a while, worked for the government, and did triage work for my former partners. But you know, experts, neurosurgeons, physicists, you name it. As they get into midlife, they tend to know more and more and more about less and less and less.
mm,
And I felt that. Maybe it was my liberal arts education, but I felt like there was more in this world in the operating room.
mm.
And like each day that I would be on call for the ER, I would see exactly how short life is. And, you know, it was time, and
Yeah,
it was a good decision.
yeah. So now that you're retired, and we talked about this earlier, your art is bringing you some comfort and a fresh perspective to life. So you're playing um, your, what's that instrument? Is it the fiddle
Yeah.
again?
Mhm.
There's one other thing that you were doing, which I forget right now, but you're engaging with art right now,
Mhm.
much more than you were allowed to when you were younger. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I started playing the violin when I was 6, and I hated it, and my opinion was of no interest to my parents. And because I did as I was told, I worked and worked and worked and kind of peaked when I was 16 or 17, soloist with the Boston Pops. But when I got to college, I just came to understand that the violin was eating my life.
Mm,
And it was a part of the parental fusion and the family surrogacy that I could credibly get rid of. So I put it in the case for 35 years. And then when I left the OR, uh, Mary said, well, why don't you sell that thing? If you're not going to play it. And that triggered, wait a minute. So then I took it out and started practicing. And for about the first year, I sounded like a cat being disemboweled, I think. But things kind of came back gradually. And now I play in the local regional orchestra, and I play every day. And it's a meditative kind of exercise that I really look forward to.
yeah. So finally, I want to ask a question about the book. One last question about the book, rather. And you talk about the cost of your life as a neurosurgeon and all these wonderful experiences you've had being the steep price of your childhood and adolescence.
Mhm.
Do you think the outcome was worth the price?
Yeah. There's a Hindu metaphor called Indra's net. If you look up at the night sky, the Hindus see Indra. And the point of the metaphor is that if you move one thing, everything else moves. And so I have no regrets.
Mm,
Uh, my childhood was difficult, but many, many other people have much more difficult childhoods than I did. My parents were crazy, but they made decisions you know, they made decisions that benefited me. They played the long game. Um, they could have made much more self-destructive decisions,
Mm.
decisions that would have destroyed them and me. And you don't have to look far to see uh, the consequence of those kinds of decisions. So no, if I have one regret is that I didn't start meditating as a young man. I've only started meditating in the last few years, and the benefit that I get is that I can relax and focus at the same time. And I would have been a better surgeon had I done that. Um, I was a good surgeon, but you know, most everything one tries to do is done better from a state of relaxed focus.
Yeah. Okay, so we are in a segment of the show where I ask you questions about art history because this is a show about artists.
Oh,
I have a two-sided question for you. And so this question is going to lean on your expertise as a neurosurgeon, so be ready. And the first question is, what's one thing that you wish artists knew about their brain?
hmm. That it is immensely plastic. I suspect that they know that already in their bones, but it is so much more capable than your conscious mind gives it credit for. You know, what it is doing all the time in terms of integrating your experience and making judgments about aesthetics, making judgments about space and color and comfort and risk. I mean, it's doing all those things under the radar. And I'm not a visual artist at all, but I think that if you can tune down your conscious mind and allow that unspoken power of the brain to show itself, it would be a great benefit to the art, I think.
What do you mean when you say tune down the consciousness of the mind?
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure I've got a good answer. Uh, there's a lot of focus on technique in art, or there used to be until abstract expressionism. And I'm talking about stuff I don't know a whole lot about at this point. But if you look at someone like Vermeer, I mean, a lot of technique there,
Mm.
a- you know, brilliant. But I don't know. I think that tuning down I guess, what do I want to say? The judgmental part of one's consciousness, if you will. Tuning that down, I think, is a boon, is a benefit.
Mm. Mm. And the other side of the question is, what's one thing you would say to people about the artist's brain to help them support the artists in their lives?
Oh, patience, being patient with, you know, art that takes a while to steep.
Yeah. Okay, you earlier talked about writing this book, and how you gotten to a point and you felt like, oh, I've made some progress here, and then you went to places and started to rethink the whole process.
Mhm.
Can you share one challenge that you faced writing this book as your first book?
Well, I'm a terrible keyboarder. So the first couple drafts were longhand. I decided to write the book with my ears, in that every word in there has been spoken by me out loud multiple times. And I was after a friendly intercourse between common words and erudite words. And I took really seriously what Mark Twain said, that the right word is lightning and the almost right word is the lightning bug. And so I wanted as many right words as I could get in these pages. I wanted every word to be doing useful work. And I respected the economy of poets. I'm not a poet, but I respect how economical they are with the use of language. And I was pretty ruthless in getting rid of stuff. I mean, pretty much everything in this little book is either about steep the adjective or steep the verb, you know. And so those were a lot of challenges. One challenge I hadn't anticipated was how to get the book out in the world. But having it in finished form, it was hard. I mean, I was kind of getting warmed up after 20 drafts or so, it really,
Yeah. And how do you feel now that the writing is done and the book is published?
Well, I'm gratified. A huge surprise was the launch here at the local library here in Topeka, Kansas, population 140,000. The library reserved a room that held like 150 people. And when 350 showed up, there was talk about the fire marshal
Wow.
and I just hadn't understood how embedded I had become in the community. I had worked for 25 years and I had spent a lot of time in family waiting rooms, at bedsides, soccer practices, parent-teacher conferences. And so the 350 people that showed up, I was just stunned, frankly. And that was a moment of tremendous gratitude for me. I mean, orderlies and nurses and, just neighbors. And it was just stunning, honestly. So, yeah, I feel it was a success, honestly, when our boys got their hands on it. And whatever else happens now is just gravy, I think.
Well, thank you for chatting with me today, Craig.
Yeah, my great pleasure.
It's been a very insightful conversation.
Okay.
And thank you for joining our conversation today. You can get Steep through the links in the description box if you're watching, or in the show notes if you're listening to us today.
Amazon.
Oh, Amazon, yes, of course. All the links will be in the wherever people are watching. And here's a reminder again to follow the show, leave a comment, whether you're listening or watching us today. And as always, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram, so follow at Journey of the Art Pod. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode. On the next episode, I'll be chatting with another inspiring artist. But before then, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what you think about this show and this episode. Feel free to drop me a note here or send me a DM on Instagram at Journey of the Art Pod. Finally, please subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or follow and rate the show if you're listening elsewhere. Help me connect with other artists who need a dose of inspiration today. Until next time, stay on the journey of your art.